Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome on behalf of the Patterson Foundation here in sunny Gulf Coast of Florida. Today, we welcome you and we're so thrilled that you're here to a session that we're having in our National Philanthropy Scan. This is workshop number 2, and it is called Multi-Sector Collaborations in Digital Access. Hey, no one said it would be easy, and you're going to hear that today, but you're also going to hear about some success in such. Just a few ground rules this morning I'd like to go through to get everyone ready on that next slide. My name is Sherry Corrier. I'm the Digital Access for All Initiative Manager for the Patterson Foundation, and I'm part of a fantastic team that's helping to bring you this session today. So please introduce yourself in the chat box right now. So we'd love to get your name. We'd like to know who you're with, what your role is. If you miss it right now, please do so at any time during the session. Rename yourself as well, which is really helpful for us because we do have some interaction later and we want to know your name and who you're with. Also, please mute yourself while the session's going on so that the presenters can be direct and speak to all of you. Use the chat box at any time. If you have a question, if you want to make a statement, an observation. Also, if you'd like to speak when the opportunity arises, please raise your hand, digitally, of course. And we are recording, however, we are off the record. If you'd like to share openly during the breakout sessions, that's what those are for. And we're very excited to have so many of them and have some great and talented people in them. So please share. Don't be afraid to do so. Also, we have some places we'd like you to join the conversation today on Twitter using our hashtags for Digital Access for All, the campaign for grade level reading, and our funder to funder hashtags. You'll also be seeing some of those items throughout the workshop. And we encourage you also, while you're listening, if you hear things that are exciting, to use your own forms of social media to project those out to the community. And then also, when we conclude today, we want you to join us for any future workshops. Well, thank you. I'd just like to run through a couple updates for those of you who may not be familiar with the Patterson Foundation. The Patterson Foundation is here to strengthen the efforts of people, organizations, and communities in ways that foster wide participation. We work with all 3 of these areas. We have a focus in Southwest Florida in a 4-county area, Manatee, DeSoto, Charlotte, and Sarasota County. But as you can see from the National Philanthropy Scan, we also work throughout the United States and internationally. I'd like to be able to introduce to you this great panel today that we have that'll be presenting. We have 4 fantastic individuals that have been working in the digital access arena, and they are going to talk to you today about their background. You should have received some information prior as you signed up for this particular event. And so I'm not going to go through and read all of those items, but I would like to introduce the presenters briefly to you. James Cabrillas. Since James' arrival at the Education Foundation of Palm Beach County, he's tripled the impact and received 2 consecutive 4-star ratings from the Charity Navigator. This year, the Education Foundation's Red Apple Supplies distributed over $1 billion in school supplies to students in Title I schools in his area. Second, we have Judith Flesher, Grants Manager for the Frederick A. DeLuca Foundation. She is currently leading the foundation's grant making in Palm Beach County, in addition to managing the partnerships in Broward. Thank you, Judith. Next, we have Nick Pavitt. Nick is the Community Partners of South Florida. He's organized 10 TED Talks, events, and with over 50 speakers from a variety of different professional backgrounds. He currently directs the 2021 Innovation Award winning Hats Off team for Community Partners of South Florida, originating as the Digital Inclusion Pilot Program. That program's called Club Connect. And then last on our screen here, you have Randy Scheid. Randy is a Chief Strategy Officer for Quantum Foundation, where he oversees over $100 million in nonprofit sector investments, which have measurably improved the health of Palm Beach County Quantum Foundation is the largest healthcare foundation in Palm Beach County. So you're going to hear from all four of these folks in detail and have a chance to be in breakout rooms with them. But next, I'd like to introduce our lead team member in the National Philanthropy Scan, Michael Zimmerman with the Patterson Foundation. Michael is our National Initiative Development Lead. And Michael, if you'd like to take it away, we'd love to hear about what you've been working on and the way this has culminated in the new report.
All right. Thank you so much, Sherry. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are thrilled to have all of you here, and we're on a learning journey together, and we're going to hop to it. Just to give a little background, so the Patterson Foundation has a digital access for all initiative, and we began. I'm a fellow here at the Patterson Foundation, and we began with a multi-sector learning journey. Right, we were exploring how thought leaders and government, businesses, and nonprofits operate and invest in digital access, recognizing the value of understanding what other funders were doing. The Patterson Foundation launched a national philanthropy scan on digital access to unearth the strategies and the approaches. What does success look like? What have been the challenges? And most importantly for us, to discover who else cares about this work. And so over the past 6 months, Sherry Corrier, who you just heard from, the initiative lead, and I went on a fascinating journey to interview more than 30 funders and organizations about their work in digital access, equity, and inclusion. I quickly assumed the role of the National Philanthropy Scan lead and gathered an immense amount of insight from what funders shared about their local, regional, and national, and even international endeavors. So while the knowledge we gleaned helped shape and evolve our strategies and approaches here at the Patterson Foundation, we also recognize the enormous value in sharing our findings widely. Thus, we are here today to do exactly that. We composed the National Philanthropy Scan report on digital access, which will be shared with you in the chat right now. We hope this report can serve as a resource to your organizations wherever you may be on your digital access journey. Different from a webinar, this is a funder workshop, which means we are creating a space for interactive engagement. We invite everyone to keep their cameras on and join in as we have conversations and explore what's possible, both as an entire group and in our breakout rooms. I thank everyone again for joining us, and let's begin with our workshop. So I'd like to start our conversation with James Gavrilos, joining me here from the Education Foundation of Palm Beach County. James, how are you doing this morning?
I am outstanding to all of you, especially I saw Dr. Bevins in sunny, warm Toronto. Welcome to South Florida, where it's 85 degrees, and I'll be playing golf later.
There you go. Greetings to our friends in Toronto. James, first of all, tell us more about Palm Beach digital inclusion, right? What is Palm Beach digital inclusion, and how were priorities decided for where the work would start?
Well, and that's a great question. And Mr. Zimmerman, thank you. And thank all of you for being part of this. It's really been an incredible journey. The one value, there are many values to working with the school district. One of the ones which we have found over the years is school districts tend to have lots of data. They've got just hundreds and hundreds of data points, both in terms of student progression and also in terms of demographics. And I will pause here very briefly to say on this call, I also have Jennifer Etheridge, who is our program director and is really kind of the brains of our outfit, and with Skendi Francois, who is our digital coach. He's the one who's been going into the households and coaching. But back to those data points. We all remember the day, it was March 13th, Friday the 13th, when our superintendent, along with I think 80 or 90% of the superintendents in America, announced that the schools were going to close. March 13th, 2020, due to the pandemic. And there was this, oh, well, we'll just shift to digital learning. And it was one of those things that sounds great around a conference table, but then everybody looked at each other and said, what does that even mean? Great, we'll shift to digital learning. And people began asking the first question was, well, what if people don't have a Chromebook? So our immediate response was, well, let's get Chromebooks out. And we raised significant funds to purchase Chromebooks. Well, then that begged the follow-up question, what if they don't have the internet? our school district produced something called what they called a heat map. And what they did is they looked at Palm Beach County, which is an incredibly diverse county. Palm Beach is really a county of paradoxes. You have, McMansions, you have $10 million homes, and 30 minutes west, you have 49% unemployment. You have this weird combination. And so the school district produced this heat map identifying the areas of poverty, the assumption being where there's high poverty, you most likely have people who are disconnected from the internet. Randy Scheid is with us from Quantum Foundation. Quantum had done a study and got the information out to us. Families without the internet, and I'm bringing this up because we quickly realized this was about a whole lot more than just getting kids to do their school lessons. Through Quantum Foundation's research, we discovered without the internet, families have lower earning potential over their lifespan, graduate at lower rates over their lifespan, and actually have a lower lifespan. Without the internet, you earn less, learn less, and live less. And so very quickly, this morphed into a massive project of bringing families who are living below the poverty level, many of whom are disconnected from the internet, bring them into the modern economy. And so once we identified the highest poverty areas in Palm Beach County, the Glades and Pahokee being one, Central Palm Beach County, Lake Worth, Lantana being a second, kind of moving in concentric circles out. We put together this massive collaboration. It was the school district that originally started the process. The Economic Council, the United Way, Quantum Foundation, all stepped in initially with, well, let's get the kids hotspots. Or many of you are familiar with Comcast and their Internet Essentials program. We realized that had no staying power. We needed a long-term solution. And so, and I'll shut up here, Michael, and kick it back to you. The result was this massive collaboration between Palm Beach County, which put up nearly $20 million in CARES Act dollars to get the infrastructure in place. The school district, who put up $45 million to purchase Chromebooks for everyone. And then the Ed Foundation raised over $1 million to buy Wi-Fi extenders. So these 25,000 families could then bring the internet signal down. Again, the presenting issue, the children could do their schoolwork. They could do their studies. They could do remote lessons during the pandemic. Long-term, families can now access digital medicine, telemedicine, apply for jobs, government benefits, and whatnot. So what began as a very simple, let's see if kids can do remote learning and do their lessons, morphed into a massive, let's bring people out of poverty into the modern economy. And it was all predicated on that heat map that the school district did. You go into the high poverty areas, chances are those are the ones who are disconnected from the internet.
Yeah. James, I really appreciate you laying out the landscape for how this began. What questions was the foundation wrestling with and thinking through partners and what data was going to be looked at in order to drive the direction of this. And actually, I want to bring in Judith Fletcher from the Frederick A. DeLuca Foundation, because I also think about when funders enter collaboratives like this, they may already be pursuing work in digital access. It may or may not align with what other funders have decided to pursue, or what data is driving their work. And so Judith, maybe you can share more. For funders that joined and perhaps were already pursuing their own work in this area, was this brand new? Was digital access something that was on the table for Frederick A. DeLuca Foundation, and or was it not? And if so, what did that conversation look like in getting board trustees and other leadership aligned with eventually joining Palm Beach Digital Inclusion?
So, Michael, digital access really was not a focus area, but what was a focus area for the foundation was youth development and healthy communities. And when we learned about the poor education outcomes and the health outcomes in the community, it really was not a difficult conversation to get foundation leadership engaged in digital access. We knew that we wanted to be a part of something that had long-term solutions and something that could potentially be systematic. And so therefore, I was thrilled that it really was not a very difficult conversation because of those, because of our focus areas originally was youth development as well as healthy communities.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, and James, sorry, yep, I see your hand.
Yeah, procedurally on a question, do you want to just type the chat or respond? I'll do it live and then you can slap my hand and tell me to shut up and chat later. But Miss Freezy asked, do school districts have data on individual students' access? And the answer is yes. What we did is we coded each, not only did we buy the 25,000 Wi-Fi extenders, we got to individually calibrate them. We even had the Miami Dolphins in their locker room volunteering, calibrating these. So the school district is actually able to gather data on exactly how much the students are using them. As I said, school districts are notorious to gather enormous amounts of data. So the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah.
And can I just add, James, that was actually one of the selling points for this program, because we wanted to know, how do we know that youth are going to be using these? The Wi-Fi extenders, how do we know that they're going to be logging in? And so that was a huge selling point for the leadership.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with another question here, because I am still curious to also understand. I think, James, you started to speak to it a little bit, and even Judith, it was integrated into some of your response. How were partners in the initiative determined, right? Who, willingness, readiness, and capacity to be part of this collaboration? Well,
I can answer from the fundraising side of the house. And let's pretend Judith is not on this call, so she'll hear me say nice things about her. When you're in our world, you know who your go-to people are. There are some charities and foundations that are what we call bricks and sticks. They want to build a building. They don't really care what you're doing. They just want to see their name on a building somewhere. And then there's people like the Frederick A. DeLuca Foundation, which says, we want to transform society. We want to elevate people out of poverty. We want to lead to sustainability. And so when the school district turned to us and said, we need you to spearhead this thing, go out and start talking to people. Well, our team sat around and said, okay, who's in the education space? But as I said a few minutes ago, this is about a whole lot more than education. Okay, who's in the economic mobility space? Who's in the transformative space? And as Judith said, Judith Fletcher and the Frederick A. DeLuca Foundation was one of our first conversations. And I think it took Judith about 1.5 seconds to say, yes, let's get this thing moving. I didn't have a single foundation we spoke to say no. So what we did is we targeted those foundations. As I said, are they in education? Are they in economic mobility? Are they in job training? Are they in health access? Are they in transformative endeavors? Those are the ones we want to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, and that, come to think of it, I want to now go to Nick Savage, because I'd like to ask him. Nick Savage joins us with Community Partners of South Florida. Hi, Nick. How are you?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Nick,
good to see you.
I'm curious because as Community Partners of South Florida has been very much integral to this collaborative. Could you share more with us about what has been accomplished thus far in the collaboration, and also what is underway?
Oh, absolutely, Michael, everyone. As James stated, pretty much what we try to do is make sure everyone stayed in their swim lanes. So as he stated, you had the youth and Education Foundation took that and ran with it and made sure those that were in school were taken care of while they were in school. And at the same time, from a community partners point of view, what we did, we said, well, let's make sure we focus in on the adults in that family to make sure that either from a technical standpoint, it didn't get overwhelmed in the house. But more importantly, you have to start the digital literacy, the digital adoption, and get them digital ready. So you're uplifting the entire family as you're going through this process post-pandemic. And as we're entering this stage now, based on us working collaboratively together and making sure we're communicating, and make sure, for example, that right now my navigators were not in the Lake Worth space. So therefore, Education Foundation jumped on with both feet and made sure that we only had 3 navigators. So Wiskendi, who James mentioned earlier, address the issues in the Lake Worth area, while we have a pretty large area in the west where we're dealing with the Glades, which, for those familiar with the Glades, has many various communities in that area. So our navigators are handling that space. So where we're moving now is to just make sure that the infrastructure, while the infrastructure is getting built, verify, trust but verify. And that's what all of us are doing to make sure that the connectivity and the infrastructure is there. But we've learned over the course of this time to make sure that great teams make great things happen by making sure we get the digital literacy started and make sure all the equipment is in place. But more importantly, start doing the digital adoption so that once the infrastructure is entirely built, everyone is comfortable with technology.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, and that actually reminds me, I just saw in the chat, the National Philanthropy Scan report was posted. This is the report on which this, if you will, a case study of what happened in Palm Beach County is included in this, and you can see how it emerges in certain parts of the report, which describe different ways funders are invested in the digital access space. So Nick, thank you so much. I think it's interesting how, and I'm sure as new information emerges on it, there's pivoting and shifting that happens as the work evolves. I actually want to switch us back to our main screen here with all the audience engaged. And if your camera is not on, please take an opportunity to turn your camera on and even unmute if you'd like to join in this discussion. Right now, I just want to see, with cameras on, show of hands, is anyone currently part of a multi-sector collaboration in your community, or have you or your organization been part of one in the past? And this could be collaborating with for-profits or nonprofits, government agencies. It could be internet service providers or other organizations. Maybe even using the raise hand feature in Zoom, if we could just see if your screen is not on, because I am curious if others joining us, not our presenters, have been part of multi-sector collaborations. So just show of hands real quick. Oh, Beatrice Farrell, did I pronounce your? Okay, hi Beatrice. I see your hands raised. Okay, I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 joining us. Oh gosh, and now my curiosity is piqued because I want to hear from each of you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so Beatrice, if I may, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but if you would allow me to, because I did see your hand go up first, could you share a little more about where your organization, or what your organization's doing with that multi-sector collaboration? It could be digital access, it could be a different area, and maybe even share with us, what's been easy, what's been challenging, and what was easy, what was challenging. We'd love to hear more.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I am not a funder, so since I'm not a funder, let me know if I still should speak.
You can absolutely.
Okay, so I'm in St. Petersburg. I'm co-chair of the Digital Literacy Group. It's a co-working group. We have approximately 40 organizations. We have the school board. We have an education foundation. We have a lot of community organizations that provide access to literacy and provide all types of social services. And when the first speaker was speaking, I was like, oh my God, this is the same thing that happened with us. So it could have been our story that we had got together about Tech Goes Home. COVID happened. We had already assembled the people, and we worked for the past 18 months to provide internet services to people who did not have access to it, just for the reasons that everyone had mentioned, that the speaker had mentioned. So thank you very much for allowing me to represent St. Petersburg.
Thank you, Beatrice. And that's the purpose of us convening right now, right? We want to hear where in other communities in our country are people, are they wrestling with similar challenges? I'm sure there are commonalities. Of course, our communities present different challenges and different hurdles that we have to jump over, but then we can find we have shared aspirations around this work. So we're here to do that. So I appreciate you sharing. I would love to hear of the other folks who raised their hand. Is anyone with a funder that, just to have a funder perspective as well on this? And that's okay if there isn't, because I would like to hear from someone else, but I'm just curious if someone's a funder. If not, the next person on my screen that I'd love to hear from is Carissa Tashian. Is that?
Yeah. Hi,
Carissa,
everyone.
With Digitunity, Carissa, first of all, we love the work Digitunity is doing. We'd love to hear more about a multi-sector collaboration that's happening in your world, and maybe you could share a little more about what's easy, what's been challenging, with our audience.
Sure. Yeah, we're a national nonprofit focused in digital equity and specifically devices. So hearing the work that's been done so far, I'll try to build off that. Nationally, we're trying to build that very multi-sector collaboration that you're talking about, because we see it as an issue from the supply chain, working with new computer manufacturers, refurbishers, the whole way up to the distribution of computers. So at our table, we've got government. We're on the cusp of hopefully getting federal government computers part of the supply chain for communities. We're working with for-profit businesses to see where their space in, they can have a place at the table. And then we go the whole way across to the distribution, working with frontline nonprofit organizations on the ground. And, it's long, difficult work that's urgent. So having all those pieces together is really interesting. We're in Columbus. That's another really bright spot, I think, to look across the country. They're quite mature in their digital equity work. And we've been asked a lot of times the long-term sustainable device aspect has been not planned for or thought through. And so we've been asked to come into Columbus, and we're expecting that in many other places. We are in many other places doing that kind of work. So I'd say one huge part of this, making this work, is education of the issue. Being in digital equity work for 20 years and hearing you say how fast all these people came together, that was not the case for the 18 other years. And so I think we have to take this moment where people are aware, they've experienced it a little bit personally, and we have to not let that momentum go and keep educating and finding a place at the table for everyone.
Yeah, Carissa, thank you so much for sharing, and I think that it's inspiring to hear where Digitunity is and spanning so many spaces to see the work move forward in effective ways that serve people, organizations, communities. And I think that's why we are all gathered here. So you are reaffirming the many reasons why we wanted to create this space and have people share. So I wanted to just hear from one more person from our panel who can maybe speak to, it could be anyone that's on our panel, whether it's Randy, Judith, James, Nick, just speak to also what's been easy, maybe in the 2 minutes we have before breakout rooms, what's been easy and what's been challenging, and why. All right, James. James, you are muted. We're going to have you on mute.
Sorry about that. There we go. I'm going to kick this over to Jennifer. The challenge has been the actual logistics, getting permits, putting up poles in areas. And I'll tell you a couple quick stories that super quick. We'd get these irate phone calls. One was this expletive-filled, horrible message on the phone voicemail of our school superintendent, and it was signed, "Thank you, Pastor so-and-so from blank blank church in Lantana, Florida." And I'm like, whoa, we got the pastors worked up. So we've had to deal with that. Jennifer, do you want to chime in a little bit on some of the logistical challenges? One of the fixes, if we had to do this again, I would have turned this over to a construction company. We've been relying on Palm Beach County's operations team to get the poles installed. And quite honestly, they've got 15 other things on their priority list. I think we would have been much more efficient had we just gone to a formal construction company. But Jen, can you highlight some of the challenges? This poor lady was in a bucket the other day, 50 feet off the ground, repositioning radios. Jen, it's over to you.
No, I would just say a lot of the things that were amazing about this partnership is learning from each other, working collaboratively with so many different municipalities and across sectors, from Quantum Foundation, the Frederick A. DeLuca Foundation, Community Partners of South Florida, and so many other partners and municipalities has been really just incredible. But it has not come without challenges. Everything from helping the county navigate so many different things in terms of working with the Army Corps of Engineers, looking at pole placement, having residents in one of our areas in the Western community shooting at the infrastructure. And then I'm sure that Randy or Judith or Nick could speak to some of the challenges that we've also faced. And we've had plenty of challenges that we've faced with our families and coaching as well. Randy, Judith, anyone, Nick, anyone want to chime in?
No. And yeah, I was actually, and Randy, because I am curious Quantum's perspective on this, maybe you can share a little more. And Jennifer, just alarming that folks are shooting at the infrastructure. And I imagine that there's communication that, you know, has to be at the forefront of preventing that from happening. But, you know, how that happens and reaching I'm sure there's a challenge there as well. But Randy, maybe just from Quantum's, you know, I'd love to hear Quantum's perspective on this too.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, Michael. So real quick, Quantum is a health conversion foundation. So we've been around for about 22 years. And yes, I am on the correct webinar, but the first question my board members asked me when I brought this question to them was, why is a health foundation working on an education project? And I said, well, think about how education influences the long-term health trajectory of an individual in a community, right? So this is one of the core elements of what we can do to promote good health. But that for us was, you know, it was a challenge. It was something we, quite frankly, didn't really think about or plan for, because for us, it seemed so obvious. But we did have to take a step back and just sort of bring some of our trustees along who were very used to starting funding or collaborative conversations around health and just kind of recenter their framework. So, but that's something that we were able to work through, fortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you all for sharing a little more. I think this paints the landscape for our audience joining us. So at this point, our workshop is going to go into breakout rooms, and we're going to have some interesting discussion. We would like everyone to participate. So please turn your video cameras on mute, and join us in the breakout room for some more of our interactive workshop. And we'll see you back here in a couple minutes.
Primarily through small grants, but post or in pandemic, endemic, we've been successful in getting funding for the initiative. And so going forward, it'll be a separate initiative, no longer a volunteer group, but what'll be a fully funded initiative. So it appears to be easier to get funding now because it's much easier to explain digital inclusion than it was pre-pandemic.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Well, thank you, Breakout Room 2. Thank you, Beth, Beatrice, and Nick for sharing. I'd like to now move to Breakout Room 3. This will be Judith. Thank you for bringing this up. If someone from Breakout Room 3 or Judith would like to share what was discussed.
Okay, I'm going to try to do this justice. We talked about the importance of partnership and who should be at the table. And one thing that I mentioned was it's really important to have a champion, an anchor organization that can help guide the work and lead the work. And that's with the community as well as with funders. I was sharing that funders really like the idea of having another funder involved in this type of project. And so I know that that's key, and I know that that was also key for us. There was also a conversation around government work, a government program for digital access and inclusion, and how there were some entities in the breakout room that were partnering in that area. And so I understand that with some of the government work, it's a certain cost to families, but then they were willing to cover the additional costs of those families. So that was also a very specific strategy that was taken from another entity. Also, it was really surprising to me that someone mentioned that there are funders in their community who are just not interested in this type of work and who do not see digital access as a form of economic mobility, which is really surprising. So I just know that there's still work to be done in this area. So is there anyone else from group 3 that would like to chime in? Okay.
Michael, are we allowed to ask questions?
Absolutely.
Judith, I'm Jennifer and Wisconsin and I, by the way, we're all in the same room. We're all looking at each other going, wow. There were actually funders in cities who pushed back on was it the concept, or did they just maybe not grasp what was trying to happen?
I was actually really surprised too, James. And is it okay, Toby? I do not want to put you on the spot, but I think I just did. If you want to kind of share your thoughts around this, because it really surprised me.
Sure. Maybe the sad thing is that I'm no longer surprised by it. The foundation I work for is based in Washington, D.C. We fund the D.C. metropolitan area. We do not have a very large philanthropic community. We don't have a huge regional association of grant makers. It's a very small insular philanthropic network. We've been fabulous in terms of working together. We've had collaboratives for 30 plus years working on all different types of issues. When we have tried to start the conversation around broadband or around digital inclusion or around internet or Wi-Fi or however we want to spin it, it typically goes nowhere. Folks will sort of throw up their hands and say, oh, that's not where our focus is. We've sent around articles around broadband being a social determinant of health. That has, sort of raised some eyebrows, and then we get a little pat on the head and they still say, oh, but it's really not the focus of our board. So we have been sort of beating this drum for about 6 or 7 years. And we'll have some interesting conversations, but no one will put up money. That said, I've also reached out to nonprofits. So if we look at digital inclusion, if I think of it in terms of sort of 4 buckets, there's the laying of the wire or fiber, the affordability piece, the actual hardware, and then the knowledge of. All of the proposals that we get are literally around the hardware or the knowledge pieces. We do not get proposals around, whether it's workforce development or environmental scans for sort of laying of wire or fiber around affordability. We get nothing in that space. I've talked to advocates focused on urban sprawl, whatever context they're working in, and this is not part of the conversation. So whether that's because they're big, the big company in town is the federal government, I don't know, but it's just not happening.
Yeah, and Toby, I know that Randy Scheid mentioned that he has a question in response. Randy, feel free to chime in.
Thanks, Michael. Toby, hey, Randy Scheid down in West Palm. Curious if you see, amazing, you've been doing this for 7 years, and I know there's someone else on here that's been doing this for 20, but even with the role of technology and the way that it has facilitated access to healthcare in the pandemic, I'm really surprised that people aren't, like, has that changed anything, or is that?
It's helped. It's helped. The start of the conversation, my colleagues at the foundation were all like throwing up our hands, like finally people are talking about this. The conversation was overwhelmingly focused on K through 12 and education. Yeah. Then once Medicaid reimbursements opened up for telehealth, and a lot of our FQHCs could get on the bandwagon and talk about, their move to telehealth. I mean, for years, we still had groups that were like moving to electronic medical records. So the health community, the healthcare access conversation has been at the forefront. The broadband access definitely brought a few new players to the conversation, but no one that's actually acting on it or funding it.
Thank you. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, this is why we do this, because we need to hear what do different realities look like in communities, and what are those challenges, and what has served and helping and what hasn't. So this is part of that discussion. Toby, thank you for raising that up for us and bringing that into this space so that we can have discussion with it as a community of of people working in digital access, and how do we do this, and what are ways, what's possible, right? So so thank you. I want to switch to our final breakout room 4. Let's go ahead and bring up their notes from their whiteboard. Okay, and then if someone, or either James or someone from breakout room 4 wants to share more about what was discussed.
I wholeheartedly nominate Michael.
Besides a TPF, person. So there were a couple ideas discussed in our room. We talked about sustainability, right? How do we ensure that the work lives on past our funding? And even talking about with Palm Beach Digital Inclusion and with other initiatives, what would we have done differently? What were some lessons learned, right? So one of the participants in the room brought up the importance of working with local government departments, internet service providers, other partners that can be at the table to explore, what does partnership look like? As we continued our discussion, we talked about, right, we're giving out Wi-Fi extenders to communities in some of these initiatives, but what about after they receive that Wi-Fi extender, is their digital literacy, are their digital literacy skills up to speed to be able to, use the internet effectively and for their benefit to participate and civically engage and be part of society and have access to healthcare, however that plays out. So their priorities, right? So is there an opportunity to couple both the delivery of Wi-Fi extenders with digital literacy in a way that makes sense for those, populations being served? So I really appreciate that. In fact, I don't know if I'm just looking here. It was Michelle, I believe, from our group who commented. Michelle, do you want to add anything else to that, to what I mentioned there in Rhode Island?
I think you hit it all, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, all right. We also talked about the process being inclusive, right? How do we make sure that everyone's voice is heard at the table? And we're thinking about people in our community that may have disabilities, marginalized, underrepresented populations that need to have a voice at the table and need to be incorporated into those plans and into the strategy and the approach. And then sustainability in general, how can we maintain a process or program beyond the initial project? And that's really important. And as challenges emerge, how do the partners shift and evolve, understanding that that happens? That's the reality of this work. And so that was brought up. And then we'll just, someone mentioned thinking outside the box about this and thinking outside what we see immediately in our periphery, and then continuously cultivating funders, donors, and an audience around this work so that both there's communication with our communities on the work that will be taking place, and that there are community conversations that can happen so that we understand where are people in community on what do they identify this as a need, that they need a Wi-Fi extender? Do they understand what they may not have, what could be useful, and how we connect resource to need? Anything else, breakout room 4, that I may have missed before we move into the next part of our discussion?
No, I think you covered it well, Michael, but that last point you just made, and I know we're on a super tight time, I would encourage people looking at this to reach out to Wiskendi, and I'm pointing, like you can see, he's sitting across the table from me. Much like I said in my introductory comments, this thing started out as, let's get kids able to do their school lesson, and it just morphed into something enormous. Well, on the receiver side of it, let's get families connected to the internet. that's morphing into something far beyond what we ever anticipated. Wiskendi signed on. I mean, we hired him to be a digital coach to teach people how to turn their computers on, how to boot up, etc. He's connecting people to job training. He's getting Thanksgiving turkeys for families. There was one house he was in that had holes in the floorboards with rats running in and out, and he's finding construction companies to fix that. And so those of you who are thinking of dipping your toes into this is a whole lot more than just getting the equipment and the internet and connecting a family. It's like a funnel moving out. And I don't want to take any more time, Michael, on your schedule, which I really respect your adherence to it. But I would encourage people to reach out to Wiskendi Francois on some of his experiences and what this has morphed in on his side of the house.
Yeah. And James, thank you. And Wiskendi, feel free to share your email in the chat, in case folks here would like to connect. And thank you, James and Wiskendi. Of course, we want to, however we can help each other, that's great. So thank you all for sharing with us. I'm glad that there were it sounds like there were great discussions in the breakout rooms. We're going to move into the final part of our program, which is our Q&A. So let's take a moment to see if anyone has any questions that or thoughts that you'd like to share. This is going to be a great opportunity to connect with others, share your questions. So please use the raise hand feature. You can also use the chat to type your question in. And let's take a moment to pause and see if anyone has any questions for the panelists or just other ideas or challenges you may be wrestling with in your communities around digital access. Okay. All right. So in the meantime, while folks are, I don't know if someone, nope. Okay. Yes, Joan, sorry, I didn't know if your hand, I thought your hand might have been raised. Yes, please.
I just have a quick question. If anybody knows of any resources for case studies where you can just read about what profiles of maybe different families or folks look like who are not plugged in. I feel like I had a fairly good handle on it prior to the pandemic about what it looked like for young children coming up in the pipeline, with families who might have, say, one device that and the family might not want to share it for data reasons with their children. But now I feel like I don't really know, and the world has changed so much. Can anybody, give recommendations where to go and sort of read status?
Carissa, do you have a response there?
Yeah, I was just typing in. Pew has a lot of great data, and I believe that they also have some stories around it. That's often my go-to place for that. The National Digital Inclusion Alliance, also NDIA, is the go-to place for getting a lot of the information in the field that we share. And I also wanted to say, in the rush to get started in all this work, I also think about the sustainability of it. About 10 years ago, there was a lot of government funding, BTOP funding, that went out to address many of these issues. And there was a lot accomplished in that, but a lot also not accomplished, or not even remnants to see of a mass amount of money put towards that. So at least in the device space, I'm thinking, James, what is your plan for the devices once the Chromebooks after 3-4 years? How will they get replenished? How will the funds come in? So thinking at the very start about the sustainability, I can't say, that's where I have my eye on the prize. Mm-hmm.
No, great question. On the Chromebook side, the school district will be taking care of that. They build into their budgets, and I think many school districts are doing that now. They just build into the budget having Chromebooks for kids. On the Wi-Fi extenders, they are going to need to be replaced. And so the question that we were asking in our breakout room, Carissa, is do we do that, or at some point do the families pick up part of the cost of that themselves? There has to be a transference to self-sustainability.
Yeah.
Michael, if I can just chime in too, from our standpoint, sort of integrating long-term sustainability into digital access, one of the things that we started doing is understanding that it's okay if we provide foundation dollars to nonprofits to purchase devices. That's fine, right? There doesn't have to, we can pay for infrastructure, software, EMR systems at a clinic, like those are good costs and those are good investments. And again, just having consistent conversations with our board around why that's important, grounded in the understanding that digital technology constantly evolves, right? My Chromebook that I have from 4 years ago, it still works, but it's sort of fading, right? But just integrating that into the way that you think about your funding and understanding that this is going to be something that nonprofits have to continually invest in.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Michael, I wanted to finish Joan's question real quick, and it kind of connects the two, if that's possible. Because we're in two conferences going on right now, and one of them is Brookings. They'll have some case study information, and that would be Dr. Camille Bousset. So we'll be seeing her in an hour, and right behind me, in another office, I can introduce you to my daughter who's with Bridgespan, and Bridgespan does extensive case study work on all of the latest topics, since they have to deal with the Linda Gates and all of the philanthropic folks right now who have the bigger money with the moonshot ideas to try to address these, technology, poverty, the social determinants of health at the highest level over the next 5 to 10 years. And they're writing research papers every week. So I'll put her information in there, and hopefully she doesn't kill me.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Nick. Joan,
Yes.
I'm hopeful that gives you some more resources, as you continue to navigate and do research. I'm going to actually, we are close to close here, so I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're going to move to Sherry Courier, the Digital Access for All Initiative lead with the Patterson Foundation, to give some concluding remarks. Sherry?
Thank you. Well, what a great discussion. And as I'm listening to everyone's feedback, and thank you all for sharing together in both the breakout rooms and here on the screen, we'd like to just let you know that this is just the second in a series of 8 workshops that we'll be having that are relative to the National Philanthropy Scan and the report that was provided. And all of the things you're talking about here are things that people across the country are wrestling with. And that's why this space is so important. So mark down on your calendar. We'll be finalizing a topic very soon for the next National Philanthropy Scan Workshop Series number 3, January 31st. I can't believe it, of 2023 at the same time, 12:30 to 1:45. And each one of these scans, discussions and presenters becomes a little bit different. So I want to thank our 4 presenters today for their amazing work before they got here today and all the years they've been involved with this, and the fact that now philanthropy is seeking to really work and talk and continue a conversation. And that's what we're here to do. Also, I'd love it if everyone that could possibly do that could come on screen right now. We'd love to take a group photo. So I'm going to turn it over to our master behind the scenes, Kiara Lewis.
I'll give everyone a second to turn their cameras on or to get ready. Then I'll do a brief countdown. Okay, in 3, 2, 1, everyone smile. Okay, thank you. I got quite a few.
All right, thank you, Kira. Now, don't go away just yet. Also, a topic that you brought up during the session was about telehealth, and one of our team members, Lauren Turner, placed in the chat a link to our survey on telehealth. In hearing that you were talking about it, we're going to feel free to provide that out in our follow-up, because we're trying to gather information across the country about where people stand right now on telehealth and teletherapy. So we hope that you all enjoyed today and that you all know that this conversation is just beginning. Want to thank each one of you, want to thank their team here, and hope that you all have a great holiday. And we'd love to see you again in January of 2023. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.